Although he tried, it was hard to keep the levity disk secret. John Searle saw a future that would want to take advantage of his generator and levity disk.
It's the flying side that brought the money in.
Yeah.
In 1968, we reached the greatest height we ever done.
The generator could be used as a power source. But it was the flying side that caused excitement. These craft had designations and sequence numbers, such as the P-11.
Probe means a probe. It's a man. PM if it's a manned vehicle. These first ones we did were all unmanned.
In his growing library, John Searle kept extensive records of his generator and levity disk. Among these documents are calculations and descriptions of experimental flight tests, some of which survive today. These are photos and excerpts from the original record of the P-11 launch on June 30th, 1968. We have carried the P-11 weighing 10 hundredweight to a position clear of the overhead high-voltage lines. The sun is shining, but it is not pleasant. The wind is cold and a force of 8 is blowing. We shall attempt a full launch and run at 1500 hours Greenwich Mean Time. We prepared the power supplies to all equipment on the craft. We are very busy, yet from the corner of my eye I can see watchers, but none have dared to enter the field. People rush to hide from us as if we were some kind of aliens from another world. Time to start the craft's generator up. This is connected to an outside source, in our case a small diesel engine. A minute passes by and the cutout switch of the craft breaks contact with the outside power source. The call comes through from Cornwall that all is ready. The carrier beam is on for the run. We accelerate the craft's generator. Now she is on her own. When the generator started, there was a whine rising to a high pitch, but that has stopped. The craft is shorting up very fast. Yes, the craft will clear the power lines with no trouble. I have stopped taking photos to record what I saw. The ground appeared to be rocking, yet I could not sense any such rocking. No noise was heard, but leaves and other material on the ground around us began to move in circles. I glanced over the far side where 2 strangers were. What happened to them? They were running for cover in the direction from which they had come, most likely scared stiff. Then the call came in. She's crossing Cornwall now. Time, 15:03 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Our team in Cornwall turned the craft for its run back. The P-11 was over Cornwall 3 minutes after launch, a distance that would take 4 hours to travel by car. She climbed at rates of up to 1 mile per second, and during that day rose to heights of 15 miles above the surface of the Earth. We went over to the launch point and found that all the small undergrowth had been pulled up with the soil and had left a scooped-out effect where the craft had stood. Another problem we must solve is this pulling up of Earth on liftoff and this burnt ring mark effect.
We found that it does tend to mark the ground. The reason for this is that there's an iron content in the ground. It is this iron that's been pulled up, and it pulls that surface of ground up with it.
Instead of having the rare earth on the outer layer, put it on the inner, reverse. So, of course, it solved it just in one action. Instead of having a magnetic field focusing to the ground, it made a donut shape around the vehicle.
The field now is a very small C field around the rim of that craft. Results is no focus to the ground, no ground distortion occurs. The other problem often presented in my case when scientists speak about my work is that it ionized the air around the craft. This is not true. There is no air around that craft. There's a magnetic field, there's a gap, a vacuum between that and the rim, and it's the photons which is discharged, trapped by the magnetic field, which gives it the glow.
The P-11 was a great secret success story, a beginning to a new age which promised that one day in the future, man would travel by this method into space.
Was it secret?
It was supposed to be, but only the media was allowed to come and watch. First, we had 400 scientists that were also allowed to come who downed it. What they said was this: it could not support itself, let alone fly. So I said, right, we have now tested 40 different structure ideas. I'm going back to the one I originally proposed. You are invited and the media to come and watch, providing you do not disclose where the work is done. Sunday tidbits came and watched the flight test. Then we had the News of the World come, because they'd seen it. We want to see this disc.
At St. John's Hall in Mortimer, Berkshire, England, scientists, the press, and the public were invited as he demonstrated his technology and declared his intention to build a manned craft.
This was the hall in which we used to hold our first Sunday of each month shows. This is the hall that was known as St. John's Hall. That's the stage which I used to stand on to deliver my lecture. The audience would sit here, the press used to be at the back. When we had a load of press come to make mockery, we had the curtains brought. I stood there. We had the national anthem played there, so they all had to stand. All these people came to make mockery. At the end of 10 hours, the press came up to me and said, "We have never seen a man stand there, talk for 10 hours without looking at any references whatsoever." So I replied to them, "When you speak from the heart, you don't need papers."
John Searle may have spoken from his heart, but by 1969 his message played to a world that had witnessed American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin returning safely to Earth, having walked on the moon, the single greatest achievement in history. The media made the levity disc a sideshow, and John Searle the original urban spaceman, a crackpot, the flying saucer man. Few would take him seriously. The merits of his generator design as a power source were lost in his single-minded effort to prove his levity disc. The press and the publicity grew.
There must be thousands of newspaper articles, television footage, and there were thousands of people who came and they filmed, they took pictures. That was the type of publicity we had. And there are many books on the market written by many writers that include my work. We had BBC regularly each month for nearly 2 years, would come and update the people. First, they would take them back to what happened the last month. Then they would say, "We went down to the woods today, and this is the progress. The structure of the demo one is now together, and the housing is going in that will house the power unit that will lift it into the skies at this point."
The Demo 1 would prove that electromagnetic flying discs were not only real, but represented the future in power and transportation. In 1968, John Searle formed the NSRC for this task, the National Space Research Consortium headquartered in his home at Mortimer, Berkshire, England. Scientists and the media were invited to watch the Demo 1 being built outdoors on a piece of land loaned to him for this purpose. This is the voice of John Searle during the construction of Demo 1.
The position today is that we now know so much about designing these vehicles from the point of an unmanned vehicle that we feel the time is right to go ahead and carry people.
John Searle had plans for a larger craft that would carry 3 people. He continues.
The 3-seater craft, which we've been asked to do, it will be a 90-foot diameter vehicle. It will weigh roughly 90 tons on completing, and the purpose is that one pilot will carry 2 official experts with him. One day you'll see a 3-seater craft, a lone star in the sky, and within a year you'll see massive giants coming up into the sky, taking 2,000 people from New York to London in 20 minutes or 15 minutes, from London to Sydney in 30 minutes, and we won't think nothing about it. And I think that this is business. This is really what industry wants. Fast movement, cheap price, no noise and no pollution. And the levity disc will give you this.
While the press and publicity pushed John Searle to the scientific fringe, some individuals examined the merits of his generator design. Was this a revolutionary new way to generate electricity? Searle came to an important realization that will stay with him for the rest of his life.
Once they see that's it, they want it, they want to own it. everywhere I go, the same thing happens. It's the same ignorance and greed coming together as a terrible, dangerous situation.
John Searle came out into the open with his levity disc, expecting a different reaction to the one he got. The press and media were quick to mock and ridicule the flying saucer man.
Reinventors, I think, will always hit problems. There will always be ridicule, they'll be laughed, they'll be mocked at, all the big, you name them, they all came under the same bombardment.
Searle saw himself as an inventor like so many others before him. He would endure the mockery because he knew his truth about the generator and levity disc. His confidence never wavered.
Well, everybody who does something different is a crank. And if this is a good sign of an inventor, then I don't mind being called one.
The interviewer that was interviewing me way back then, 68, when he said, are you a crank? And I said, well, everybody that invents things are cranks by you people. So I don't mind being one. That must mean I'm going to be important one day.
Did he invent something so astounding it had to be marginalized? His generator and levity disc could no longer be kept secret. Searle tried to patent his new generator design, the power source for his levity disc.
Back there in 68, the patent office rang me to say that, having studied your patent you submitted, we advise you not to patent it. It's know-how. Never patent a know-how. When you're ready to go to the market, you have two options. You can either take out a watermark in your name or in the name of the company who's going to produce it. You've got two options. Never tell anyone all the details. The vital bit that makes it work, keep it to yourself until you're on the marketplace.
Having been advised that his generator design is a know-how and he should keep it to himself until ready for the marketplace, only served to further isolate Searle. During this period, he held a full-time job and spent all of his spare time developing the generator and levity disc. Several events helped to explain his conviction. The first happened near Warminster, England, where John flew his P-11 craft on Sundays.
When I first came in the open, I was caught red-handed flying the craft. Every Sunday night, we'll pull the craft in, take the plates out, put new, and send it off again. Off we go to the next weekend. Now, this one night, now we've done this so often, we never dreamt of anyone coming by. Not at that time of the night. And there we are, we sent the craft off, and unknown to us, we were actually seen by a television crew on the way back from something they did that night. So Monday they went to the Warminster area to see the two RAF people in charge of the UFO investigation that went and studied UFO claims. And they said, they saw this craft. They said, no, we got no new crafts on test because they thought it was a new Air Force project being secretly tested. No, they said, so they go down to the radar unit of theirs and ask to check last night's reports. Nothing there. They said, we saw it. Let's go down there next Sunday and see if anything happens. And of course the Air Commodore agreed to go with them. We brought the craft down. We changed everything. They didn't interfere. They were watching, but unknown to us, of putting the new plates in and sent it off. I said to Tony, let's pack up. Get out of here. I feel something strange. Let's get out. And then, bang on my shoulder, Tony, stop fooling about. This is the Air Commodore, Great Britain. This is his name. And the ITV camera crews turn on the cameras.
Searle was at home in Mortimer the following Thursday with his friend Reverend George Nicholson and a visitor from Aldermaston Atomic Works.
At 3:15, I had Reverend George Nixon with me as witness. Newsflash, it said, the Air Commodore has a message to tell you. Then I knew. The voice said, "This is the Air Commodore of Great Britain," and I knew instant what they were going to say. And he said, "People in Warminster may now be able to sleep in peace."
For weeks, people in the Warminster area had been reporting numerous UFO sightings. The British Air Commodore broadcast a news flash assuring that it was John Searle's flying discs and not UFOs.
There are no aliens. It is the work of John Searle. We caught up with him last Sunday night and asking him when that was going to return. He said next Sunday. We didn't believe him. We called him a liar. But he insisted we could stay if we wish, but it wouldn't come back till next Sunday. And we did. I'd like to inform you we are now packing our bags and moving on because we agree John Searle means what he says. And then he said the words, "When this man comes out in the open and show the world, he will overrule the Americans and the Russians. He will be master of all air and space." And the flash ended.
After the news flash, the scientist from Aldermaston Atomic Works insisted Searle turn over his levity disc.
The scientist, just like that, "Give it to me." I said, "No." So he pokes me again and said, "Give it to me." I said, "No." So he turns to Reverend George Nixon, pokes him and said, "Make him give it to me." He said, "I can't make him give it to you. What you're offering him? Nothing. It's about to keep a lot of people employed and he will get royalties from the work done." So Reverend George Nixon said to him, "It's not royalties he wants cash now." He said, "All right, so you're not giving it to me. I'll stop everyone helping you, then you'll give it to me." And he went off. A month later, checks started to come in from Australia, Japan, because the news had flashed all over the world about this Air Commodore catching me.
With this attention, Searle was further convinced that the outside world would eagerly accept his generator and levity disc. The activity around the building of Demo 1 drew the attention of Dr. Arthur Kane from NASA in the United States.
Here's the view. Dr. Kane from NASA there. He wrote a serious report to NASA.
He came and interviewed me and checked everything, and he stated in his reply that unless NASA married this technology, when they hit the marketplace, they'd be completely finished. They would have nothing to match it or to touch it.
By June of 1976, this letter arrived. It reads in paraphrase, "Dear Mr. Searle, I have the responsibility for U.S. Air Force propulsion and energy conversion research and development. We would like to acquire a copy of your report entitled Disc-Shaped Type of Flying Craft." The letter is signed George Uhlig, Major, United States Air Force, Engineering Division.
Edward Air Force Base examined my work. I was requested to submit my work to them to evaluate so that I could get funding. He said he'd be in London and he'd like to collect all the materials to take back for the scientists to examine. All I had to do was be in London to deliver the goods to him. That's only a small unit, a 4-footer, which we just took around to show what it's made up and how we make them up, how it functions, in which you're not letting it fly. You're just showing people how the thing works. So the unit runs very slow. As the Major's letter said back to me, that they could find no inertia, and that goes against all grains. There were people who developed rockets for war use and were still making ballistic missiles for the purpose of future wars. So you got people geared to rocketry. Though they did look at this technology, they decided that it would take a lot of study work to understand it, and therefore, forget it. Rocketry was vital. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time regarding NASA and the Edward Air Force Base people.
Whether John Searle was thought of as a serious inventor or just the flying saucer man, he had gained worldwide notoriety. The weekend work on his levity disc was updated regularly and featured by some media outlets. In one case, a demand was made for time that he didn't have. Searle explains.
You were invited last Sunday to come and see it. Everybody was invited. All the media was. you didn't want to know. John Searle was nothing. This was all dreams. Now you suddenly see in a paper who did take the trouble to come, that is true. All right, so you're not going to show me the IGV? No, certainly not. All right, we'll put pay to that. Suddenly come out, front page, John Searle con man. Do not invest in him. Thinking that would force me to show them. What I did, I said that to the government. I told them, you know what I'm doing. This is slanderous defamation of character. And they wrote back, dear Mr. Searle, we can't do nothing, but what we will do is we'll ask all our laboratories to supply you with all the information you need to help you.
The British government was aware of John Searle, if only as a result of his own letters complaining of the press coverage. This was a one-of-a-kind story. The flight performance claims for his levity disk were astonishing.
It's easy for us to put a craft up and send it to anywhere in the world, unmanned or manned, and it will reach the point in the shortest possible time. The program on the models used to do from England to Australia in 30 minutes with no trouble at all. And we anticipate the manned craft we're building now will also easily cope with that speed. From 1963 until about 1978, where we had to stop because of cost of operation, we flew, say for instance, the Demo 1. That flew 500 times around this globe through the use of ham operators.
500 times around the Earth. Had the unmanned levity disk reached outer space? In his plans for the manned craft, Searle openly spoke to the press about a trip to the moon.
The moon, as I said, we could say an hour trip. You land it after you clear the air belt. So you're 20 minutes climbing out. And what did the newspaper say? John Searle said, 2 seconds to the moon. John Searle didn't say that. John Searle said, 20-minute gentle climb out. 2 seconds switch off power on the top plate to let it pick up speed. Then put it back to hold it at that new setting. 32 minutes we should be in orbit around the moon to look for an ideal spot. Probably 10 minutes to find an ideal spot to put down on.
From the Earth to the moon in 1 hour? The flight tests of his levity disk established stunning claims that did not go unnoticed by the Cold War superpowers. They accused each other after detecting unknown spacecraft.
There was a time where we did put a test. We did take a vehicle up there, and Russia and were accusing the Americans of having a secret device up there. The Americans were accusing the Russians of it. It was neither. And that was the Air Commodore statement, really. Here the Americans and the Russians are thumping away at each other, accusing each other of these secret things going on. And here's the man in England twirling the knobs that is causing wholesale chaos with the big boys.
Searle caused even more trouble. The high energy from his disk interfered with radio communication at nearby Blackbush Airport. Ironically, this was where he would earn his fixed-wing pilot's license to avoid any civil aviation objection to him piloting the first manned levity disk.
I think it was Daily Mirror report, a Derby area, about UFO night watch, where thousands were watching the sky for a UFO. Just a short ride away, John Searle and a colleague are testing one of their UFOs. The press rang me and said that Blackbush Airport said that they have phoned you up and asked you to remove your disc from the airfield area because you're blacking out the radio. Is that right? I said, yes, they have asked me to remove it. This has now been done. They said, we'll be putting this in the paper, this report. So I went and got the papers. I said, UFO over Blackbush. A UFO appeared over Blackbush, blacked out the radio communications of incoming aircraft. That's all it said. Now from that moment on, every article that came out said UFO, never ever mention my name, but I had invited them to come and see the show.
The press treatment of Searle began to take its toll. With the high level of attention, some of the Demo 1 team members became suspicious. Was there something genuine beneath the ever-growing circus around John Searle? Dispute and dissension came to the Demo 1 team.
Dispute occurred and the team wouldn't turn up because, unknown to me at the time, the one chap in charge of the work with me had another team down in Eastleigh. He was making the same vehicle, but he would join my team to find out how we did it. They had a craft in exactly the same construction as mine. So we dropped them. I just dismissed the whole group and just finished it myself.
John Searle would not patent his generator, so whatever was secret would remain secret. The money stopped coming in and he terminated the Demo 1 project in 1978. Soon he was faced with something new.
I had a good team at Greed, at Mortimer, very good team. But then you see, like all teams, you'll get one who suddenly realises the value of what they're doing. And then greed comes into play. They think that by owning it, they control the will. They dictate who can do what and who can't, how much you've got to pay for that right. And that's the shame of it, because here was something that should have been on the market. Generators should have been on the market in '68.
At home in Mortimer, Searle was served with court papers stating that he owed the electric board over £10,000. By 1982, he was arrested and accused of stealing electric power. Here's how he answered the charges.
Well, what happened was electricity was expensive, and I didn't have the wage packet to meet the cost of that. Working on this, trying to get this idea right, and we did have 2 units. One I took to shows, and the one I fitted in the house and put all the wiring on it. The one in my house for 30 years, they took apart, they found no wear or tear. In fact, they was almost sure they only just been made. They was that good.
What happened to that one?
Well, when the court asked if they could bring the generator in for the court to see it, they said they had confiscated it. So I feel inclined to think that they broke it open not knowing what was inside.
Who confiscated it?
The electric boards themselves. Because they told the court that it did not comply with their standards. The judge wasn't quite satisfied that I was this dangerous man that they were trying to portray. So they asked the chief man what was strange about this man's house. So he said, why? There was 2 little switches, block switches, what we call grid switches on the wall. So he pointed over to it and he said, see those 2 switches? Yes, what's strange about that? Well, he's got 16. We took the floorboards up, they got power transformers on them. What's strange about that? I've never seen anything like that before. So he asked him, what else was strange? So he said, well, out in the shed, he's got all this equipment from the floor to the ceiling. It looks like NASA. He said, what else was strange? Well, he said, we were trying to find where the electric came from. We cut the wall, we had to cut the walls open. We come on this box. He said, we took it out. When we open it, we got these plate things and we got rollers running round. So the judge said, what's strange about that? He said, well, we can't understand how they run. No, Judge, can't you do that? No. Can't anyone do that? No. Is that man there cleverer than you? Yes. Here's your bill back. No way am I going to make that man pay you £10,975. I knew what the judge was trying to point out to him. That I can't be insane if I'm cleverer than him.
The electricity to run his home sometimes came from his own generator. That generator was never returned to him. The semi-favorable court decision was costly. The price he would pay was divorce and the breakup of his family. The memory is difficult.
I'm a loyal person, and that I wouldn't walk out unless pushed out. Only the work kept me going.
John Searle sacrificed his family in favor of his invention. He left his home and disappeared into the Midlands of England. The only consolation came in the form of recognition for his commitment to his generator. Professor Shinichi Siki from Japan suggested the name that would stay with the generator to this day.
You are the finder of the technology, so it ought to have your name to confirm you are the inventor. So they suggested it be called the Searle effect generator. Searle effect generator is simple. Just call it SEG. When I look at it now, it's a shame that the amount of stuff that was lost, because there was about 101 volumes of records of everyday work, photographs that were taken by people that sent me copy, press articles. These have all vanished over time.
After the court case in 1982, John Searle walked into obscurity in the Midlands of England, taking nothing with him but the secret know-how he had refused to patent. His extensive research library, records, documents, all equipment, and his family were left behind. Very little has been recovered.
He had this, he had that. He showed no evidence. He said things were destroyed by fire. We've heard that story many times before by people. A load of crap. I don't believe a word the man says. That is the standard thing.
4 years later, in 1986, Searle was found and asked to return to his lifelong work. He had lost nearly everything, but here was the chance to tell his story and prove his generator with a more scientific approach.
He was a man that hunted for 2 years to find me. And when he did find me, by luck, that he contacted somebody in America. Oh yes, we just spoke to him. He's in the Midlands. So they gave him my address and he came up and he said, if I come back, I'll put £2,000 in to get you started.
For the next 15 years, John Searle lectured all over the world. England, Australia, Scotland, Canada, and the United States, to name only a few. Crowds were sometimes shocked to discover he was still alive, but eager to hear him tell the story of his generator and flying disc. In Germany, 1989, he was awarded the honorary title Professor of Mathematical Structures of Creation and Energy.
I was well known. I was known by people like Sir Freddie Laker and other people like that. I met princesses. We talked. They enjoyed every minute with me.
John Searle had become Professor Searle, and an aura of mystery had formed around the flying saucer man. But where are the witnesses?
There are plenty of witnesses around, but there seems to be a problem. They do not like to come out in the open. They've read too many books about men in black breaking in, destroying their homes, burning their property, and FBI and things like this, breaking in, stealing this, stealing that, and they're frightened. They're dead frightened.
Is the Searle effect generator so profound a device that it would change everything we know? Perhaps Searle's refusal to patent his secret was working against him. This is Richard Vere Compton.
I worked with John. I was responsible for converting ordinary 250-volt electric drills so that they would run on 12 volts, so we could cut up the timber rather than using hand saws, and we could speed the process of building the disc, the 30-foot disc. Ken Pirelli turned up at my doorstep and told me about Searle. I went to see him and saw what he was doing, was rather amazed that he was building a disc in somebody's garden. So I thought, well, this could be fun, let's see what happens. And of course, very soon one began to feel that nothing was really going to happen.
If nothing would happen, what was it that captured Vere Compton's interest?
Well, basically, the Searle effect was meant to turn the ether, which is all around us, which contains energy, and tap into this energy, which has euphemistically now been known as zero-point energy. And various other people who followed Searle's footsteps have also potted around, and they've tapped into it by mistake.
At his home in Mortimer, Searle had been arrested for stealing electric power. Vere Compton had visited Searle years before the arrest and remembers the switching over to the Searle effect generator.
He said what he was going to do was to switch the swirl effect generator on by cutting off the electric power, and it would then be running on the swirl effect generator. Well, as I said before, and I keep using this word, the jury is still out as to what John actually did. Were the puffs of smoke and mirrors? Did he switch a straightforward inverter to inverter on? Was there any dip in the voltage? As far as we were concerned, 1 minute the lights were on, and the next minute the lights were still on. And there was no dipping, there was no fading, there was no bleep. So this is unusual if you're switching from one power source to a next. But no, I have not seen the Searle effect work.
Veer Compton never saw it work. Why then have so many tried to copy the Searle technology? The story is always the same. John is told the really big money is not coming unless he can prove the generator by revealing how it is made. John Searle refuses to give up his secret.
The secret will never be there until the conditions have been met, as the Patent Office advised me, will be fulfilled. And the sooner they understand that and get down and get it done, the sooner we're going to do it.
Where is the secret, John?
Right here.
Over the years, the standoff has continued. Searle has been involved with numerous individuals and companies making the same promises to rebuild his generator. They all fail for this same reason.
They are working with scientists around the clock to get that engine out I showed you before. I signed a contract with someone else to make it.
But the controversy around Searle and his generator continues to grow. Some take a different approach. This is Michael Nelson from NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the United States.
A lot of people have an interest in anything that has to do with more efficient electric motors, more efficient energy devices, because we're in a situation where we're in an energy crunch.
I do work for NASA. I can't say I'm representing NASA at this point, but we just have an interest in this kind of, in what you're doing and what's going to come out of it, hopefully. What people want to say is impossible is that you keep a couple of magnets continuously moving. You have one big stationary magnet and you have a smaller magnet that rotates around that. And if you can just show that, you've made a major step forward as far as showing, hey, this principle will sustain movement. That's the big question that I'm seeing people raising about what is possible or impossible. You have done this in the past, and so you're trying to get to a point where you can do this. You're looking at just trying to do a small demonstration of, say, one roller, or how are you thinking about doing it?
Well, at the moment, I'm hoping that down there in California, Morris will make what I call the glass demonstrator, and get that running and have a bulb so that as it revolves, the bulb lights. And it just keeps on running all day long while you're lecturing.
There you go. Once you do that, you've stepped beyond the bounds of what people say is possible.
There are legitimate experiments that are going on to manipulate gravity involving superconducting disks where an intense magnetic field or an intense electromagnetic field is applied while a disk is spinning at a high rate of speed. And there are experiments that are being conducted to investigate this phenomenon.
Superconductors and rotating magnets may hold the key to generating an unlimited source of energy. But did John Searle's combination of rare earth materials and magnetic fields in his Searle effect generator already do that?
Magnets have been used in 1,000 different ways over the years, and this type of behavior has never been exhibited, has never been seen.
This information was never given out before. Others who have gotten a hold of a piece of a demonstrator that would show the Searle effect, and they broke it apart, and they looked and studied, and it cannot be back engineered.
The SEG experiments, the initial ones that Professor Searle talks about, occurred at the height of the Cold War. If this technology was viable, and he says that military people looked at it, if the technology really is viable, it would have been irresistible to the military.
Whose hands the technology go into is the problem. That's why all these years I sort of geared this technology away from the military establishment.
The claim is that these things have been built previously, they've worked, they've been demonstrated, but today no working prototype exists, and in order to build a working prototype, some people want $500,000, and they can't show you anything until that time.
As far as why hasn't anybody done it, many people have tried. The only one that has succeeded is Professor Searle. We want to succeed again. We want to build again and demonstrate again. This is our primary goal. The only thing holding us back is funds.
There's talk of power companies and utilities, big corporations, who are threatened by this kind of a concept. And the theory is that they've tried to suppress it. They've tried to suppress the research and prevent it from reaching market because it'll damage their markets.
They want to maintain control. The oil companies and some of the other big businesses run this world. Unfortunately, they run most of our governments. So that even our government, which we would think would be very interested in something like this, sometimes doesn't respond because of pressures put on by big business and by economic advisors.
The most benefit to any individual, let alone a company, to be made from this is by appropriating it and distributing it to the public and by manufacturing it and making people pay to buy it from you. Taking out a patent, copyrights, whatever you need to make yourself or your company the source for something so profound, you would be the richest man in the world very quickly.
Now, if we give them a method where they can produce electricity at the cheapest method with virtually no input, I think that they would like that and go along with it and want to develop it themselves. Once they see that this device is going to be a fact of life, they will try to cash in on it.
Maybe there are people somewhere researching this type of thing, but it's pretty obvious that nothing, no hard evidence really has turned up yet.
The effect was well known in the scientific community. It was compared to, it was alluded to. This is much like the Searle effect, or this is a lot like the Searle effect. So he was used as a base point, and not somebody that was off the wall.
If you can prove the technology, if you can demonstrate the technology is functional, that it really works, all the questions will be answered. People can't argue with success. They can't argue with what they see right in front of their own face.
I can understand why people would have difficulty in understanding it, because it does take a great deal of effort to make sense of it technically.
Fernando Morris, an electrical engineer and computer specialist, is responsible for the most credible attempt to rebuild the Searle effect generator.
We have something here that needs to be investigated, and really that's my role. I am a technical investigator of ESCG.
In his home laboratory workshop near San Diego, California, Morris is following the footsteps of John Searle. Personally guided by Searle himself, he is rebuilding the generator precisely as Searle did long ago. Morris developed the unit that reveals a magnetic sine wave in the Searle generator.
That's how I started off, is to try to build a magnetizer for it. And if I could develop this sine wave, which I'd never heard of before, I think we're onto something, and we could build upon that. Now that is proven, repeatable, and I've got the unit to do that. It's a process of magnetizing the rollers and the plate. And when you develop sine waves on it, what you in effect, you're developing a motor. And that's essential if it's going to be a viable device.
That's exactly what I've been saying since 1946. There is a waveform in a magnetic domain on that metal. And the scientists say impossible.
Morris has invested his time and considerable personal fortune into this effort. After years of studying Searle's books, trying to decipher their meaning, and endless question and answer sessions with the man himself, what does he know that assures him Searle is right?
I'm going to release a piece of information here that I haven't shared before, and that is the law of squares. That's one of those question marks right now, is how does that come about? It took me a while to understand it, but what it is, it represents time, space, and energy. And what it says, it's in a random state. That's not useful energy. But what John has done is he has transposed that matrix so that the output is uniform. And within nature, uniformity means resonance. So if you can resonate that random energy, you got yourself an electric current, because electrons are the only things that are free to move on metal. So what we got here is a converter of random energy into electrical current. And that's the brilliance behind the machine here, is not only was John able to decipher his matrix, but he was able to make it into a workable device, and that's the SEG.
Morris's mock-up of the SEG needs an outside power source, just like Searle's original back in 1946. This unit does not contain the rare earth material and will not display the Searle effect. It was built to demonstrate Searle's contention that spinning magnets give off an electric charge as measured by the flashing LEDs. What will be the reaction if and when the Searle generator functions as the inventor assures it will?
I think the public will demand to know, why has this technology been ignored? Why have the experts failed to recognize it? John has a solution that is really the ultimate solution, because we're using energy that's already available in nature, and it's benign. I think we have a wonderful opportunity here, and it's a shame it hasn't been taken advantage of. I mean, John has been struggling to get this technology out for years.
John A. Thomas Jr. wrote a book about Searle, then formed a corporation with him in 1996, DISC, Direct International Science Consortium, for the purpose of rebuilding the Searle generator. Thomas's study of the Searle effect has convinced him beyond any doubt that Searle is telling the truth.
The funding that was done for all of this work originally was done by individuals that wanted to see this done, all private. No public money was put in. People in this country and in London, in England, all around the world have been lied to. They have been told that this can't exist or doesn't work. Every Sunday, Professor Searle would go out and physically demonstrate a craft going up into the air in front of a whole crowd, and there was no admission. Here is the craft, here it is in the air, this is what it does, and they didn't believe it. And they shunned him and called him and classified him in with UFO people and fringe people, and he's showing you. My God, there it is. And the United States has not heard of Professor Searle. They don't know who in the hell he is. The people of this world have been offered this technology in a refined form, usable, since the early 50s. And it was their right to have it, and it's been taken away from them by the media and by the power companies and by the people who are running this economic society. And we have been told that we cannot have this and it can't exist. Yeah, we could be living in a new world today that we should have had 25 years ago.
John Searle has since reformed the Searle International Space Research Consortium, or SISRC, an offshoot of his earlier organization. He lives and works in a small residence in the north of London. It is packed with equipment and computers. Visitors come from all over the world and are mostly welcomed by the man with a wary eye.
All my life since that lesson, I see this everywhere. People are more impressed with lies than the truth. I can't, because I'm talking from the heart, the truth of what I know and what I do.
But the proof that everyone wants to see is the generator running. It's not enough that Searle has written thousands of pages in his books, volume after volume, demonstrating his knowledge of magnetism and the tremendous scope of his work.
It is a standard problem. Here is something that is not confirmed in print, technical book. It has to be confirmed in print. You market it, you'll get 4 Nobel Prizes at least.
The Searle effect generator represents a fork in the road of scientific development that was abandoned nearly a century ago when ether theory became a relic of the past. John Searle came along, and whether he knew something special or just didn't know any better, he chose the empty road and traveled it alone. Could it be that Searle is right?
They looked at John Searle as a silly old fool, lost his marbles. He ought to be in a nursing home, being cared for.
If they don't make it, they don't want to know. If it don't come inside their rules, they don't want to know. The trouble is, we're confronted by a brick wall called the expert scientific world. If they haven't done it or cannot do it, it's impossible to do. All these years, 1964, we were at a peak, we were demonstrating, and still the scientists say it's impossible to do. Really? Well, we're going to show you. They're wrong. And they have held up this technology since 1946 to today.
Perhaps it's easier to believe that Searle's technology does not exist. The Searle effect generator at first look seems to violate known physical laws. Energy must come from somewhere. John says he found it in the rare earth material. Could it be that simple? Searle speaks his own language, a combination of known physics and terms he created to describe his invention. Could it be that John Searle is misunderstood? Numbers in squares told Searle that nature has a way of creating order out of chaos. Does the Searle effect generator convert random energy into usable electricity? When his generator is overloaded, it affects gravity and flies. John says he gave it a body and let it fly. What is the truth? German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer was once quoted as saying, "All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident." Could it be that John Searle's technology is passing through Schopenhauer's 3 phases of truth? The movement toward alternative energy sources is worldwide and essential. The promise of a working Searle effect generator represents a paradigm shift and a renewed hope for all life on Earth. The questions around John Searle and his invention need only one answer: build a working generator. When the rollers are moving around the plates and the energy is there to use, or when the skies are filled with flying discs transporting goods and people from place to place. Until that time, we have the man who speaks from his heart.
Seems strange after all these years to be walking on this lump of ground. And this is what they call the common, but to do sort of shows, you had to get permission. They never refused me. I was never refused. They gave me the okay. So we used to do our lift off and take off over there. And the audience would be here. So we would fly over here, make up we were crashing, and everybody held their breath. Then up it would go again. This area was a good place for shows. People would come from far away. I mean, everything was done. The people said never happened, and they're dreaming. Here's the very film.